Alright, well, time for our tier list. But I figured before I actually get into the actual tier list this time around, I'd do something special. Now, I'll note that basically for a lot of these tier lists, I'm actually making them myself, which basically means I go in, create all the icons specifically for the tier list, upload all the icons to the tier list when I basically make them, and then I do a tier list right after. This will be the first time we actually get to see me actually make the said playlist this time around. So, make a template. Make your own template. And we're just going to call this CC Red Alert FMV Game FMVs. There is no Command and Conquer category or real-time strategy category or anything like that, unfortunately. Be nice if there was, but oh well. So I'm just putting these in random. And we're just going to put down here the original FMVs associated with Command Conquer Alert. We'll put on a cover photo. These are the cover photos I basically have right here, so this will be for Red Alert. We're going to browse. Here's the FMVs. I haven't yet basically got done for Command and Conquer here, but I'll get them done eventually. So there's the 52 images basically for Command and Conquer Alert here for the FMVs. And by the way, you guys to get them in this order, I actually have to number them, so even though this doesn't actually look proper, once basically upload the list, it'll basically look proper. Alright, so S, fantastic, A, excellent, B, C, D, and F. Alright, well there we go. A new tier list for FMVs. And yeah, I figured it'd be fun just to at least show it off at least once. Yeah, there we go. CNC Red Alert Game FMVs tier list. Alright, so, as you can probably guess from what I basically did here, this is the FMV tier list, specifically for Red Alert. I did Red Alert first this time around, supposed to the original Tiberium Dawn, just for the hell of it, because why not? There's actually quite a few FMVs basically in Red Alert, because you have basically the original campaign FMVs, a couple non-animated ones, which is basically Frank Kaplecki being killed by Joe Cocoon, and Free Allied soldiers basically popping up in the start of Soviet Mission 2. Anyhow, let's just start up the game here. I'll go Red Alert Remastered. While that's loading, I'll note that basically, as you can see here, they're all numbered properly. So, got the game intro here. All the Soviet missions basically numbered in correct order. All the Allied ones basically like this. I'll note that this all as a result of me number them. So, everything in here is basically numbered from 0 down to 16 here, and 17 with the Allies, down to the start of the Retaliation ones down here. By the way, I have the Retaliation FMVs in here as well as the giant ant one. There we go, that's done. We're gonna move that right there. I'll get this basically out to play. So, I'm not basically gonna show off the entire game intro and stuff like that, but I'll basically just jump back in here for each thing I basically judge. So, the game intro is basically when you click here, you get Einstein here for a little bit talking about stuff. So let's let him talk, and then I'll be right back. Alright, I just finished watching the game intro for basically the entire game of CC Red Alert. Basically, sort of like give a synopsis of what what's basically happening. Essentially, like gets like the premise basically out of the way as to what's happening in this game.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Just gonna quit out of this right now.
Terminated.
So yeah, basically the thing about the game intro is that it basically like establishes the premise of like Red Alert right away. So you basically have like an introduction to like the scientist feeling a machine in front of you, and in the background you basically hear someone basically yelling about like stop feeling that thing and like give me the like the codes and everything else. And you basically soon learn that basically Einstein has gone back in time. He basically visits Hitler and basically removes him from the time stream, putting him out of the way. And then, with a song, time will tell sort of finishing off, he basically like, this ends right there. And basically the like proper like anime intro of like Red Alert, with Hellmarks blazing in the background. And it's a very fine way of basically introducing this game. You basically get like a good idea of like what the game's basically all about, very solid from the beginning. So basically like the premise is that like Einstein went back in time, and as a result of his like meddling into time, you now have like a screwed up history where Stalin's basically trying to take over Europe. And I have to say it's a fantastic intro basically to like establish what basically is going on here. So why not? Let's throw it in like S tier right away. All right, so I'll note basically for a lot of us, I'm basically go through to the mission select here. And basically, for each of these missions, there's like an introduction that basically like shows off like the FMV that basically like starts at each mission, and then your like little MA thing basically right after it. So we'll go into the introduction here for a lesson in blood. All right, well, so I really like this sort of introduction to like the Soviet campaign. The idea is basically like you're casually like coming into a conversation where Stalin, his confidant, and like Redenko are basically going about like talking about sarin gas and how to basically use it to like gas a civilian settlement. And then you like learn right after that basically like you're a new lieutenant that's been like basically noticed by Stalin, I guess. And he basically wants Redenko to basically assign you to be like do like a task of some sort to prove how useful you basically are. Right after that, Redenko basically notes to Stalin that there's basically just like civilians being like hostile to like the Soviet Empire. Stalin's like, okay, butcher them all. So Redenko's like, okay. Noticing that you're still here, he's like, okay, here's your job, go butcher them all. And it really like sets off the tone. Basically, these guys don't really care about like civilians at all. They just like kill them. So love them or hate them basically. And it really gets into like the depth of what like the Soviet Empire is basically all about. So, right off the bat, we have a very fantastic intro. Soviet 1. No prisoners, no survivors. Alright, well, by the way, I want to note some about the images I basically used here for this playlist. So, I'll note that basically I've already watched basically all of these already. And each of these, like, quotes basically I have in these, like, pictures, it basically corresponds to what I think is, like, the most notable thing that's basically said in those, like, cutscenes. So, basically, like, the game intro, time will tell is like, what Einstein basically says to sort of finish things off. And, it basically like, drives home the point. Basically, like, time will tell what I've basically done. And then you have like the intro with Graniko there, he's basically like, no prisoners, no survivors. Basically like, reiterating like, what like Stalin's basically tasked like him to do. So you're basically doing what Stalin wants you to do, basically. Alright, so on to the next one. And by the way, completions basically have like, an anime thing right here. On the bar, there's like only one like, completion I'm basically gonna worry about, and that's basically for like Tina's Tale. And like, the finales. So you don't see me hitting this button too much, but whatever. Alright, guard duty. Here's the introduction to another Soviet character.
Congratulations on earning this assignment, Commander. I am Captain Georgy Kukov, Chief of Field Operations.
Now, this is finishing. I'll note that basically this is like a, one of like the cutscenes basically gonna like right here. So that's like not animated at all. That's basically like live action right there. All right, so I have two basically right here. We basically have Soviet 2. See you in Berlin. which is basically the last thing Kukov basically says to you before, like, the cutscene basically, ends for him. And basically to free, like, soldiers standing up basically to, like, be spotted by the binoculars. So this is basically a sort of like, just for like, throw in there, introduction to sort of for like Kukov. Essentially, like, you see him, like, just like being introduced here for the most part. Nothing really special about him. He basically tells you that, like, he's the captain basically. Right now you're basically on, like, just in guard duty, just like sort of like, hanging out. If allies basically attack you, then like, you have permission to basically fight them if you want to. And basically the allies have been moving closer, and they actually do fight you, so you have the mission after that. And otherwise, it's basically just an excellent sort of like way of like sort of introducing like Kukov. He's like this like down like into the detail basically. He's just like okay, I'm your captain. Here's your task. Do your job. I'll see you in Berlin. Nothing too special or oriented. He's just a down to earth type of character. Now, I'm not that the free like so standing up. It's like interesting, but nothing too special. I mean, it's like nice to see like a little bit of like FMVs being used as like introductions for like missions, but it doesn't really do anything like really special. So yeah. And you know what? I think I forgot about one of the like FMVs here, so I'm probably gonna actually be like adding to this basically in a moment. We'll see. All right, so this is a mediocre one. I'm just gonna throw right there, and I'm just gonna write down. Let's get out of here. You'll see what that's all about later. Alright, so Soviet free. This is basically the one where like you have to deal with a spy. So covert cleanup. Introduction. Let's go.
The Imperialists are at our mercy. We have 14 tank divisions on this border. And the Allies with only...
Alright, so a traitor's death. And then we have like this like a little bit of like the cutscene we see opening up here. So I'll note that covert cleanup basically it feels overacted. Basically, you have Gradinko like basically looking in your direction a lot to sort of like so you can basically see like his like facial expressions because he's not really speaking a whole lot. But it sort of like breaks the immersion just a little bit, so it's not great. But it does have like a very like notable fact base about this like cutscene because this is the first cutscene in the Soviet campaign where Kane shows up. Essentially, he like has like Kane's ear. He like tells like Soviet that like your facility's been blown up. After that, basically triggers like Stalin to sort of talk to Gradinko about like why is our thing not secure. And eventually, like you learn that Einstein's basically escaped being kidnapped, so there's that as well. Anyhow, so Soviet like free. He must die a traitor's death. It's like laudable, I guess, to sort of like note that basically like Kane's basically being like involved in like this game as well, but. I don't really like how like Gradinko's being like shown really because he's basically like glancing around at you a little bit too much. It could be better. All right, so damage to completion. This guy gets shot. Nothing special. All right, behind the lines.
Good work dealing.
All right, a very short FMV with Nadia right there. So, behind the lines is basically where, like, you have to basically destroy that radar dome. And now they basically like, tells you that, like, the idea here is we're going to throw the allies a bone, so they basically get distracted by you. And your job is basically to come in behind, blow up their, like, radar dome, and then, like, blow up your troops. I kind of don't think that, the cut screen basically, like, matches with, like, the mission gameplay as well, because there's, like, no, like, special troops basically like, dropping in. You're just, just basically, running in, blowing up their, like, radar dome, and, like, killing your base right afterwards. I mean, Nadia is fine as like an actor. You basically get to like see her like pretty much in person for the most part for the first cutscene here, but it could be a lot better. I think I'll say it's efficient because you really want your like cutscenes to match up with like the mission themselves, and this one didn't really match up very well. So we'll say it's like the first efficient one right here. All right, completion. So basically the power plant getting destroyed and stuff. Distant Thunder. Kalki's Island. Very annoying, but whatever.
When you kill one, it is a tragedy.
When you kill 10 million, it is a statistic.
It is indeed.
Do what you must for the people.
I really want to just include that little part here because it's kind of important to sort of like, you know, show how Stallin's like, you know, sort of, you know, mindset here. So, another thing about Distant Thunder is that you basically have this personal briefing with Stalin. And basically in this, like, you know, personal briefing, you get like his little famous quote about, like, you know, when you kill one, it's a tragedy. When you kill, like, you know, 10,000 or 10 million, it's a statistic. And they basically call him, like, you know, a killer, like the butcher or killer of, like, people, but he loves the people. And, you know, history will basically judge him. And yes, history will judge Stalin very well. But anyhow, basically the gist of, like, you know, this, like, you know, little mindset, like, you know, mindset, like, you know, FMV is basically sort of like teach you a little bit, like, you know, the character of Stalin here. He basically is, like, you know, fooling himself for the most part. He, you know, thinks his, like, you know, actions are, like, you know, for a greater purpose, despite, like, you know, how many lives he basically takes in the process. After that, he basically promotes you to the same rank as, like, you know, Field Captain Kukov, who you basically saw in, like, Mission 2. So, hooray, you're basically the same rank as that guy now. And he basically then tasks you to go off and, like, you know, do, you know, another job for him. Overall, this is very, like, you know, it's a very bland, like, you know, just, like, you know, show off, like, what's, like, you know, Stalin's basically all about, but it really drives home, like, you know, what this character basically is. So, you know, it's an excellent one, basically, sort of, like, you know, teach you about, like, you know, who Stalin is and, like, you know, what to expect from him. And then completion, you know, you exploit the Rangers here, blah, blah. Alright, bridge over Richard Gotsny. Basically, we have to go and, like, you know, avoid the cruisers basically blowing up your supply trucks and such.
You said this would not happen.
Alright, well. So, this is basically the one where, like, you know, Nada's basically, like, you know, failed to, like, get some supplies, like, to where it needs to be. And it's not your task to take it there. And it's obviously at the end, it's like, you know, if you fail, do not return. So, I'll note the entire purpose of it's basically saying, like, if you fail, do not return. It's basically because, like, you know, it's like, final, like, you know, lying to you. Essentially, it's like, you know, the idea here is, like, if you fail, you're, like, as good as dead to, like, Stalin. So, yeah, don't fail. But, for most parts, it's, like, you know, very, like, you know, lackluster, basically sort of, like, you know, info dump of what's basically happening. So, essentially, the Soviets are, like, having troubles because, like, you know, the United Nations is now backing the European cause, like, you know, self-determination. It's not terrible, like, you know, like, say, like, you know, the other two here, but it could be better, so it's laudable. Alright, the completion. Basically, you have, like, you know, the destroyer being destroyed by a sub. Core of the matter is next.
Что? When? Is the core safe?
Alright, so this is a very odd one.
Warning, warning. Core temperature rising. Meltdown imminent. Time until meltdown 30 minutes.
And yeah, it's a fairly important cutscene to sort of, like, you know, get behind the fact of what's going to happen here. So, core of the matter. You basically saw what the introduction, like, you know, tip I basically have for the quote basically here is. Essentially, she's like, is the core safe? Now, I say this is a very odd one to sort of rate because essentially in this point you basically have Nadia and Kukov basically on the, you know, the briefing table. And Nadia basically learns that, like, the core is basically under threat, the nuclear core. Kukov initially volunteers basically to, like, you know, go sort out the matter, but she's like, no, it's too important, you stay here. And then she sends you basically off to go and do it. This seems like a very odd choice because you're both basically field captains, so why is, like, you know, Kukov being, like, you know, relegated to basically stay home, so to speak? You think, like, you know, Nadia would be like, you know, Kukov, you go and get killed, please. But she's like, no, don't do that. And it doesn't really, like, you know, match up with, like, what's going to happen later in the campaign, so I'm just going to say it's kind of mediocre. I mean, it could be deficient, but I'll say it's mediocre for now. And at completion, it'll basically say, like, you know, meltdown averted, have a nice day. Alright, Elba Island is next. And yeah, it's basically like, Nadia and Stalin are basically in the bed in this one. Watching the parade. Alright, so, another sub here, doing its job. This is a really interesting, FMV right here, because essentially it's the first one where you basically get all four of, the cast of the Soviet campaign, or, 4 minus, Kane, of course, basically, appearing at once. You essentially get to see, Stalin and Nadia in, the bedchambers, basically watching the celebration of, Berlin being conquered. Then it then cuts to basically, Kukov in, a security, room. And you are basically there. And basically, sort of, gives the idea of, how you basically learned of, what's basically transpiring in, the bedroom, because you and, Kukov are basically watching it on the camera. After that, you, Kukov, Grodinko, and, you're basically all three right at the table. You're joined by Stalin and, Nadia, who are, now dressed. And they basically teach you about, this allied super weapon called the Chronospear. Nadia also drops a hint that there's basically, a companion weapon on the Soviet side called the Iron Curtain. And essentially, you also have, Grodinko basically, standing up ready to, go to do the next mission. But Stalin's like, no, you stay. Send the captain, please. So, basically, another, instance where, you're basically highly, rated for your skills, I guess. And, you're being sent out to be, do, these, tough tasks, basically, as a result. Overall, it's, another fantastic, sort of, FMV, so let's just throw it up here, I think. And yeah, some things you're not clear to see is basically, quoting basically, Kukov is basically, he turns off the security camera in, the security room, but whatever. Alright, so, it gets bombed by parabombs. Liability elimination. And this is another one where basically all 4 characters are basically present, but whatever. I fair note that Kane's basically here, so this is the first one where you have all full cast basically for Soviet cutscene right here. Alright, so just finished watching this full FMV for the full cast here. I have to say that liability elimination is kind of odd because you basically have Grodinko and Stalin basically doing a death warrant thing with Kane there. And they basically drop over to the security room where you, Nadia, and Kukov are basically watching in. But the odd thing basically here is that Kukov's strange. He didn't really mention that truck, did he? And Nadia's it's containing Iron Curtain elements. And somehow Kukov's basically in the loop now as to what's basically going on. Which seems a little bit odd because he shouldn't really know about that stuff because he's not high enough level for it, right? So how does he know now? You don't know. I have to say that liability elimination, I think that it probably could be he could have been promoted first, so I'm gonna say that this one's basically deficient. Because it doesn't really match up with the other stuff here, so yeah, it's gonna be deficient. And it's probably worth knowing, by the way, even though I'm putting a couple of these deficient here, it doesn't mean they're bad FMVs. It just means that there's a little plot hole or problem with it basically that could be improved on. Alright, so completion. The V2 rocket launcher is basically in position here. Alright, Overseer.
Advancement in the Soviet army can be rapid. Continue to accumulate victories, and the future is yours.
Alright then, so this is basically our one-on-one with Kukov. He's basically been promoted to being a general. And now it actually makes sense that you actually know a little bit more about Iron Curtain at this point because he's probably the rank for it. Basically the idea here is that he's assigning you to do a task to go about taking a supply convoy basically out to where it needs to basically go. Now, I'll note that this is where we basically the problem 9. Basically Overseer feels like it should have been before 9 because he's not yet a general, basically in Soviet 9, but now he basically is in Soviet 10. So I think Soviet 10 is a little bit backwards because he could have been promoted already, but it wasn't. I don't think it's a bad one, basically showing off a little bit about Kukov's demeanor and stuff like that, but it's mediocre because it doesn't really like mesh well with like Soviet 9 because he should have been promoted before. So it feels like this mission should have come before. But whatever. And then you have like the big aircraft coming in, blowing up the tank. Sunk cost is next. And yeah, I'm not going to show you off what this one's all about, but you know what's going to happen basically. With the T.
We have matters to discuss.
Nadia's T is excellent, for sure. Alright, so. The death of Gradinko. He was a good soldier, you know. Slightly incompetent, but oh well. Now, I have to say that sunk cost is like, another one that's a little bit of a miss for me. Essentially, you have like Nadia killing Gradinko in this very like, horrific like style, basically, so to speak. And, that's a pretty like, awesome basically impact for an FMV basically to have. But it does have a small problem with it in that like, Kukov basically comes in right after and he's basically like, hey, that's my job. And this is basically in like, reference to the fact that basically in like, mission 9, he's like, Nadia, I'm sure you'll basically find a way of like, disposing of like, Comrade Granenko. And she's like, yep, I'll do that. So it's like, okay, what changed? I mean, it's not a bad scene, and it's gonna be important, basically, like, what she basically says with like, my pleasure. Basically, after like, you basically hear like, about the T being excellent and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't think I can put any more in laudable because it's a good scene, but it just has a hole in it. So, it's mediocre. I have to throw it down there, unfortunately. It could have been better. There's completion. We've already seen this once, so whatever. Alright, so now we're on to 12. Oh yeah, by the way, it's worth knowing that basically you're told, like, you're hinted at basically at the very end as like FMV as well, that like, Kukov has basically discovered something called the Chronosphere. And it's basically a top secret like military project for like the Allied forces. So that's like your hint basically about, but nothing more than that, I guess. Anyhow, it's time to capture attack centers.
Play it again.
I want it.
The Allies are calling it Chronosphere technology. My sources tell me it is done with extremely high energy.
Alright, I sort of missed at the end there, but whatever. So, capture the attack sectors is basically like, the aftermath after Gradinko's been killed. Basically you have like Kukov telling you like, Stalin and Nadia and you basically about like, this Chronosphere project that they basically found out. And, essentially like, Stalin's like, I want it. And it's like, Comrade Stalin, how? I'm surrounded by idiots. And yeah, basically that's where this quote basically comes in for like, this little bitmap here. Because like, he's like, I'm surrounded by idiots, let's take it, I don't care how. Now one thing I really don't like about this like, Pacific like cutscenes is the fact that you basically have like, Kane in the background there. And he doesn't really seem to like, do anything except for just being in the background this time around. So, it's like, what's the point of Kane being like, here in this background? In the other ones, he's basically like doing something important, but this one he's like, not really doing anything important. So why bother having him like, there, besides just having him there? There's a nice little bit here where it basically tells you that you're like the general now, because, you've basically been promoted from like, your like escapades like before, I guess. It's laudable. It's not terrible, this one, but, if Kane wasn't there, I'd actually rank this higher, I think, because he doesn't really serve a purpose, so why keep him here? Okay, there's completion. So, the Tesla coil. Alright, we're into, like, the penultimate missions down here. Capture the Chronosphere and Soviet supremacy are coming up. Introduction, here we go.
I cannot believe they would risk keeping Einstein in such a poorly defended area.
Einstein is gone, comrade.
Alright, so. I really don't think much of Capture the Chronosphere. I don't think much of the mission. I don't really think much of FMV, basically, either. So basically, soon we'll stay invincible is like, a quote from like Stalin, who's basically like, we're gonna capture the Chronosphere and be invincible with our Iron Curtain together with it. But here's the thing about like this mission here. Basically, the briefing is like you've basically captured Einstein in like that last mission, like mission 12, and it's like in mission like 12, Stalin was like, if only we hadn't let Einstein slip through our fingers. I'm gonna brush that bit off though, because like it could be today like you don't like no value in Einstein right now, because of the simple fact that like at this point it's not really about like having Einstein design his weapon for him. It's basically about like using what basically is worked for now, basically like getting to like the device. So it makes sense that they probably would bait him out as like a threat basically to be like executed and like allies rescue him, so it's fine. Now I will note that there is like a little bit of like a mishap though basically in this one, because basically after like Einstein is like whipped away, Kikov basically explains the mission, whereas like if you fail to capture the radar dome before going to the chronosphere, the mission is going to fail. And basically this is a mission where you can actually destroy the radar domes as opposed to like capturing if you want to. So it feels a little bit odd. So I'm just gonna say this one's a little bit mediocre, because I think it would have been better if like if like the gameplay matched up with like the briefing, and it didn't really do so here, where like you had to basically destroy the like radar domes. It's a very minor thing, but it's just like it doesn't really match up very well. So yeah, there's that. All right, completion. The Soviet Star. All right, so we're getting to the final bit of like the Soviet campaign here. Soviet supremacy introduction. Here we go. Nope, probably this is the one where the FMV is basically like after like this little image here.
This was not to happen. The chromosphere was to be ours. Now all we have is a pile of debris. You, General, are to blame.
He failed to deactivate.
If the chronosphere is not to be ours, then let it be buried with the remains of the Allied dogs. Where are they?
Alright, so Soviet supremacy, the introduction to it. You disappoint me, Kukov. Now, I will note that basically, like, this FME actually matches up with, like, the idea of, like, Mission 13. Essentially, like, Stalin's like, was there a fourth transmitter? And, like, Kukov's like, and then, what happened was basically after that, of course. But it's a really nice scene, basically, because it really shows off, like, a lot of, like, the anger of, like, Stalin here. Basically, like, you failed. You failed, basically. So you're basically been put out the shot. Now they basically intervenes, basically to sort of like, point out that no, it was Kukov who basically failed here, not the general. So basically, like, Kukov is basically, like, left on the floor basically soon after. And then after that, basically, like, Stalin's like, okay, I'm still mad. Here's your redemption. You're going to basically go off and, like, level up the, the England coast, so to speak. And now he's like, protesting, like, there's no way he's going to be able to pull that off. And Stalin's like, no, you shut up, or else you're going to be on the floor of Kukov. So it's a really like excellent like introduction to the final mission. All the misgivings basically I have of like a lot of like the other FMVs, this one's like a great one, basically sort of like show off basically like what like Stalin's basically sort of like. He's basically a butcher. He's like, okay, you fail me, you can die. Well, you didn't exactly fail me, but you were close enough to the failure, so I'm gonna make you go do something very difficult and then die if you like fail again. Alright, so anyhow, this is basically going to be a completion like one where I basically get to see like what happens at the end here, so yeah. I'll be right back. As I basically watch like, the final FMV here for the Soviet campaign.
Comrade Chairman, I am the future.
Alright, so that was the finale. That is watched there. So I am happy to basically see like Kane, I guess, in a way, but I'll note that the finale could have been better, I think, without Kane basically being there, or like maybe he like would come in a little bit later and be like basically let Nadia do her thing, basically like Stalin, and like he just comes in from on screen like as a final like farewell, but bam, shoots her off and then like says his piece. He didn't really have to be staying in like the the shot, I don't think, the entire time. Alright, so basically give you a recap of like 714. The Soviets have basically conquered Britain, and like so the Stalin's basically celebrating. You basically get a little cue from like Nadia, basically with like the tea, and Stalin's like, okay, well, when in Rome, and so he drinks the tea. He's like, this tea is excellent. Nadia gives her a little line. Eventually, like Stalin like chokes out after like a little bit because he doesn't immediately choke out because like why not? And then like after that, basically Nadia like does her like spill, and then like Kane basically finishes it off. I guess it's a good way of like tying in like Red Alert with like the Command and Conquer like franchise, but it could have been better. I think it's not like the greatest send off, so it's only laudable to me. So that's all I can really say about it. All right, so that was basically the entirety of the Soviet campaigns like FMVs here. That only took me about 35 minutes, so that's fun. I probably should have broken this up a little bit, but whatever. Let's just go through the Allies ones as quickly as possible, I guess, here. So, in the thick of it. Introduction, here I go.
Bring him back to your drop-off point for immediate evacuation. Be careful. The base is heavily fortified, but not invincible.
Their weakness is power. Black out the base and nothing will stop you. Good luck.
I wanted to include that little bit basically at the end there because it is like sort of the introduction mission here. So basically this is the introduction mission for like the Allied campaign. You're basically introduced to like General von Essling, General Stavros, and Tanya Adams. And your task is basically to rescue the 4th cast member, Einstein, who's basically not in the like the the set this yet, but he's basically a part of like the cast for the Allied forces, I guess. Now, what's really interesting about this like FMV, basically like drives home the point that basically you have to like destroy the power in order to like get like the Einstein. So it basically sort of like reiterating like a very important prospect of like this mission is like to sort of teach you about like power mechanics for like the enemy base. Overall, it's a fantastic way basically sort of like getting you basically into it right away. So you're basically coming up to like your task here. You have to basically help out like Tanya, basically rescue like Einstein. All it really is to it. And there's completion. The cruiser's basically blowing things up. Alright, 5-1.
Soviet aggression has increased tenfold already. We don't have the manpower to fight Stalin's armies on every front.
Rest in your hands.
Go!
Alright, so. Whoops. Their lives rest in your hands. So, this is a very, like, simple, like, continuation, I guess, type of mission. Essentially, like, the, like, allies are basically being hard pressed by, like, the Soviet forces. And basically, like, you come in, like, oh, hello, Commander, I got a task for you. Please go and, like, help this convoy basically get through, please. This is a fairly, like, excellent, like, FMV to basically like, sort of drive home the point of, like, the desperation of, like, the Allied forces right from the beginning here, so I think it could have been better, but, it's a great, like, continuation, basically, to sort of, like, get you into, like, the game. So, throw base up there and excellent. Okay, completion, the convoy gets through. Alright, dead end. And here's a bridge. And that's 5 something. I'm gonna have to basically do another, like, icon. Oh, right. So, I'll note that basically for the Allied campaign, they don't have, like, FMVs for every single start for missions. Basically, like, dead end is basically the one where, like, you have, like, your task of Tanya, you have to blow up the bridges, and then, like, that's basically, like, your job, basically. Just destroy the bridges and, like, go to the next mission. Now, I'm gonna have to basically do, like, an FMV here for, like, the completion here, because this is not entirely animated. Well, maybe it is animated, I'm not really sure. Basically, there's, like, tiny atoms basically placing the bomb. Maybe it is animated. And I'll say it's animated. I always like seeing that FMV, but whatever. Or that, like, animated, like, bit right there. Alright, 10-1. Introduction.
Commander. I wish I could say I had good news.
The Reds from breaking through.
Alright, so. That was basically the introduction to Allies 4. You know, I like the idea of, like, you know, General Stavros being, like, you know, sort of like tutorial guy basically for you. He basically, like, you know, tells you basically to start this mission that, like, you know, you're basically still standing, everything's basically still there, you basically left from, like, mission 2. So, it's a nice little tie-in basically to, like, you know, what's basically to, like, come from this mission. So, you know, it's just another excellent mission basically, sort of like, you know, drive home the point. You know what? I'm gonna throw this basically up to fantastic, because this is a fantastic FMV, so it can go right there. And then we get up to the completion here. So, basically blows up the stuff. Alright, so, Tanya's Tale. I really loved the, like, you know, the mission for Tanya's Tale. I do like a couple of the FMVs, but this first one here is... How can I put it? I'm gonna watch this one through, fully through for you, just so I can, like, point out, like, you know, everything I hate and like about it, I guess.
Government leaders have abandoned the capital and are now hiding in exile. Information
So basically, we have this, like, little newswoman, sort of like telling you about, like, you know, what's happening in Greece, basically. She also gives you some background information about, like, you know, the United Nations, and they're basically, like, you know, idea of, like, you know, creating, like, a global, like, defense force.
Now it remains to be seen if Allied forces will be able to weather this onslaught intact. Reacting to this latest assault, Allied diplomats led the United Nations in a 281-7 vote that, in approving a unique military funding initiative aimed at increasing global Allied support. This proposal calls for the formation of a global defense agency to be temporarily established in an as-yet unnamed European capital.
Alright, so far this is, like, just fine to sort of, like, you know, drive home this how bleak the situation is.
Bad, does it not? Well, it is. But Stalin has just written his obituary. At last, this will help us galvanize the rest of the world against him. Yes, we have lost Greece. But we are not out just yet. Stalin may think...
Note how Stavros looks like very, like, you know, just, like, you know, disincentivized to, like, do anything right now.
This war on top. My old friend...
And then Tanya gets he calls in, or is, like, you know, Tanya's man.
One of Tanya's men. She found something. But Russian security agents have captured her. They will almost certainly take her back to Moscow.
Stavros like, yeah, so?
We must get her back. She has vital information on the Iron Curtain project. That information could help tip the scales in our favor.
And I will note that I do like this idea where, like, you know, Stavros is like, why are we basically helping her? She's one woman.
He is of no use to us. The Soviets currently hold Tanya near Grodno. The prison is well guarded, but a supply truck from a nearby Soviet base runs through the facility several times a day.
So here's basically your, like, explanation of what's going on here.
The war factory. They may be able to hitch a ride into the prison compound. Once you have found Tanya, get her out of there any way you can.
And by the way, here's, like, a continuation of, like, you know, the cutscene. I'll cover that in a little moment, but basically, like, you know, there's, like, the sort of, like, the downfall of, like, you know, Stavros here, because he's basically, like, you know, completely, like, you know, completely at a loss as, like, he's lost his homeland there of Greece basically being destroyed. He's basically a Greek commander, right? And now you basically have, like, you know, Von Essling coming in here being like, you know, oh, I'm gonna go rescue his, like, you know, my lady friend here. And Stavros like, what? Now, in many ways, I think, like, you know, it could be, like, you know, explained a little bit better about, like, you know, the importance of Tanya basically here. So it is, like, an excellent cutscene, I guess we'll say, but it could be better, I think. Alright, so now let's just jump into, like, you know, the next bit here, which is basically, you know, Tanya being, like, you know, interrogated. Now, note that a lot of effort went to, like, this cutscene here, because you basically have, like, you know, the interrogator and Tanya.
Such a pretty face.
Where is Professor Einstein? I was hoping you'd say...
I was actually thinking by the way to like put the quote being like such a pretty face, but I decided that basically is like what it basically says in like next like the ending scene here, so I decided to go with like what it basically says right here, with like the drug he's about to basically like use, because it's like a lot more chilling, I think. Okay, I'm just gonna cut this part here because it's a little bit graphic, so basically avoid that for YouTube. So I really like this sort of like cutscene because it basically drives home basically like, the sadistic nature of like this interrogator and what like Tanya has to deal with as like a field agent. I think I'll throw that basically up to excellent because it goes there. All right, completion. And this is basically where like we have like Tanya being like completely disheveled from like being tortured and stuff like that.
So very pretty,
Yeah, so very pretty, right?
but oh so stubborn.
Alright, so an action like flashing like FMV where basically like Tanya's rescued by her man. Nice little way of basically seeing like the interrogator made his comeuppance basically. So it shows like Tanya being badass, right? So excellent. It'll go right there. I was gonna basically like rank like the first like FMV there, kind of lower, but I decided like it really isn't that like laudable or mediocre. It is an excellent like FMV, so we'll start ranking him lower a little bit from now on, I guess, for like 6 here. So yeah.
Government leaders have abandoned...
Whoops, wrong one. Iron Curtain infiltration, go.
Excellent work, Commander. The information Tanya recovered has proved invaluable.
My watch is not working. Any vehicle or structure covered with this effect, by theory, will be impervious to harm. It's incredible.
Nikos, put your personal losses aside for a moment, will you?
Yes, of course. Besides R&D functions, this base also serves as a waypoint for Soviet submarine actions, so it is heavily populated. As far as we can tell, the only prototype they have of this Iron Curtain is located here. We do not know if it is operational yet.
Commander, your task is simple. Get into that base, infiltrate their laboratories, and destroy all information and prototypes of this Iron Curtain.
Alright, well. I'm thinking about it a little bit here, but I'm thinking that I'm going to actually drop this down to laudable. The thing about the initial introduction to Allies 5 is that sort of indicates that you're just going in to rescue Tanya, and it doesn't really say anything about blowing up the base afterwards. And this basically in comparison to this mission here, where Allied Mission 6, you basically have introduction to Einstein. You're basically told about this Iron Curtain weapon that basically makes stuff invulnerable to harm. You basically have Star Wars being distracted and startled and everything else. And then you basically have a little bit of an indication that you have to basically find the prototypes and then destroy the prototypes, so to speak. And I consider this to be a lot better than the past one. So we're just gonna throw this basically up here, I think, and excellent. Okay, demo completion. It's basically the Ally, signature there. Alright, sunken treasure. This is basically another where you don't have a sim-mac, you just have the little sim-macs as opposed to the FMV. So yeah, basically this we have to build up the sub-pens this one, so that's what that one's all about. Alright, so we are at a defense mission now. This is another one of Einstein, by the way.
Incredible.
Yeah, Yeah, there's like
And
Einstein
they
right there.
disappear and reappear, but with very little control.
Nice throwing is basically up here because you looked at how Stavros basically like, distracted he still looks.
The Soviets
It seems like
recently
out, but
learned of
whatever.
its location and have begun bombing it regularly.
Oh, you have Von Essling being your like tutorial guy basically again here.
Research site.
And the scientists working inside.
Get to the base immediately and fortify it. We would evacuate the base, but months of preparation would be wasted. The buildings and their contents must remain operational until the experiment is complete.
Alright, so that's basically the introduction to Protect the Chronosphere. And this will be the first one where I'm actually going to say is like, sort of efficient. So I don't really like the FMVs from like the Allied campaign as much as like the Soviet ones. And this is basically the real FMV that basically kills it for me right here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to throw this all the way down to terrible. So basically the idea of like this one is that Stavros is basically still distracted for some reason, but there's really no reason for it to be distracted in this one. Basically, you're making like good efforts on this like Chronosphere. So what? Some men were obviously lost. That's like definitely compared to all the men in your homeland being lost. All right, so that's basically the Allies 8 introduction. There's the completion basically is successful. So there we go. Alright, extract Kosikin. There's lots of characters basically for the Allied campaign. Not really sure where basically throw Kosikin because he's not really a Soviet character as opposed to an Allied or Soviet defector, so to speak. So whatever.
Commander, I believe we may well be at the turning point of this war. Get your APCs in and Kosygin out.
Well, I guess we got a 2 for here. Alright, so victory is finally within our grasp. So there's no Stavros in this one. It's just a one-on-one with General von Essling here. He's basically telling you so here's the issue. There's basically atomic bombs being developed. We really need to deal with this right now. So go find this defector and bring him home. See, I really don't think much of this mission, but it is sort of important. So okay. I feel to say this one's laudable because it's not like anything special. This one. Actually, no, I'm going to say it's mediocre. I don't really think much of Allies Mission 9 and this could have been done so much better to sort of drive home the point that atomic bombs are very dangerous, basically. No, I'll say it's laudable. It's not that bad, so let's throw right there. Alright, so I'll note by as well. I basically have a little thing here for John Cocoon basically killing off Frank Kapaki. He's basically playing the Soviet Guard there. I always found that to be a fantastic little showing of acting right there. So let's just throw it up there and fantastic and destroy right there for now. All right, completion. The APC running away. Suspicion. Introduction. Here we go. Here's Kosikin, by the way.
How many atomic bombs?
On Pomazhny, he is mad. How can he do this?
Explain, Kosygin. What are you talking about?
Stalin! He announced he is telling everyone he's threatening to destroy the world. His missiles are ready. He's preparing to launch.
Is this possible?
A week ago, no. But now, who knows? This does not sound like a bluff. Even now, a great purge tears through the Kremlin. Your allied force becomes too powerful. In his fury, Stalin kills his own people. More death, more dishonor.
The Russians are manufacturing missiles at This site?
This factory's main site. We call it Temные Vasodniki, the Dark Horsemen. Commander, you must destroy it. Everything. Scorched earth.
Establish a base first, then move in on the command center. Get a spy inside, and neutralize launch capabilities. Once the missiles are neutralized, destroy the facility. Everything. Scorched earth.
Alright, I felt I really had to show off that, like, you know, bit there of Kosogen. So, I'll note that basically that's, like, a really awesome, like, you know, cutscene, because basically, like, you know, it basically has, like, Kosogen being, like, you know, very standoffish, like, you know, well, I defected, I guess I'm supposed to help you guys. And then, all of a sudden, basically, like, he hears, like, you know, Stalin basically, like, you know, giving, like, the broadcast he's gonna launch this missile, and he's like, okay, time to go full on, like, you know, acting here. Full on rage. This is actually really good, like, you know, FMV basically right here. It also has, like, Star Wars basically, like, acting like it should be. Fantastic, it can go right up there, I think. Alright, so, I'll note that basically in between, like, you know, these missions, you basically have, like, you know, well, you can't really see it here, but essentially it's basically, like, you know, the, in between, like, you know, FMV, where basically, like, you know, Von Essling's like, you know, Commander, as I'm sure you're basically aware, missiles have been launched. Your only goal now is basically into the command center and, like, you know, go inside and deactivate the codes, please. It's very interesting to basically have it, like, you know, pop up in the middle of the campaign, but it's mediocre, really. So I'm just gonna throw it right there. Alright, so that was too close. Blah blah. That was too close with naval supremacy here.
That was too close. Command center here. Once they are cut off from communications with Moscow, clears a naval passage so our ships can move up the river.
I wanted to basically capture sort of like the, like, you know, end bit right there of, like, you know, the command center. So I'll note this is like in our case where, like, the FMV doesn't really match up with, like, the mission itself. And it really feels like, you know, they could have done a whole lot more to sort of, like, make, like, you know, allies, like, you know, 11 basically here, like, you know, so much better than what it basically was. Basically the idea here is, like, you know, you could have, like, a two-phase mission where you have to basically blow up the Soviet command center and then, like, you know, clear the river, but I guess they simplified it and made, like, you know, alright, I don't really care about you clearing like, the command center, just, like, you'll go up the river, basically, so to speak. But yeah, it feels like it's sufficient. I feel it's probably like down here, so that's where it's going to go. Completion. Yeah, basically, like, you have a destroyer. It's going to basically be dropping off its, like, you know, depth charges. Or basically, it's the one where it's going to blow up stuff, I guess. Alright, so I guess it's like the extended cutscene of, like, you know, blowing up the stuff, but whatever. Takedown. Introduction. Here we go.
Accursed Vezza.
Alright, so a very simple, like, you know, introduction for this mission here. So, the idea of, like, takedowns is that basically at this point you're now in the USSR. And essentially, like, you know, Von Essling's like, you know, this is so terrible out here, but whatever. Commander, just go infiltrate those, like, you know, tech centers, please. That's your job. You'll have to say it's like a very, like, you know, sort of like lackluster way of basically sort of getting into, like, the USSR, but whatever. Really mediocre. That's where we're going to throw that one right there. Alright, completion. Basically you have, like, you know, you're supplying up the binoculars and you have the CL destroyed. Okay, focus blast. Huh, this is being shown off again. I'll note by the way that, like, Focus Blast is basically another one of these, like, top secret, like, mission briefings like this. So, no, like, FMV besides like, the one right there, I guess. And yeah, APC as well. Alright. We're down to, like, the introduction for the final mission here.
I assume everyone can handle the orders they have been given? Any questions? Good. Give him hell, boys. Dismissed! The chronosphere. Is this to help you? Even Stalin's new Iron Curtain will not be able to stop us.
Einstein wanted me to warn you that the chronosphere could produce unknown side effects. Be careful when using it. Even we do not understand its full power.
Yeah.
Alright, so. I'm actually glad to see in, like, Alice 14 establishes sort of like back to his, like, form, basically from like the initial, like, mission. He's basically like, tutorial guy basically again. Like, here's the chronosphere. Be careful. We don't know the full effects of what the same thing does, so be careful. Alright, so as like a sort of like, final mission for like the thing, it's interesting to see like the sort of round table before like, you basically get into it. But I can't say I think much for like this like sort of like finish here, so well, I don't think much for like, basically like, the start of it basically, so to speak. Compared to like say like, Soviet 14 where basically like, you have like Kukov being killed like, dramatically and like, everything else basically happening. This is just like, not really all that like, fleshed out as like something very like compelling to basically watch, so whatever. Alright, so it's time for Musps in the Wind.
Do you?
I don't see anyone. Must have been the wind I heard.
Alright, so I used to think that the last like FMV for the Ally campaign is very lackluster. I still do think they could have been done better, especially like with Stavros, basically like he overacted there basically at the end, where like he should have just walked off basically. There's like no need to basically have like him basically throw up his hands in the air and have like very brisk walk. He just could have just walked off and just be done with it. It's a lot of a cutscene because it's a very cool way of like dealing with like your like hated enemy there. Just like stuff a rag down his throat and like put a rock on him. And it's like let him like sit there to just sort of die in the rubble. But yeah, it feels like it was overacted, and that's like the only problem I basically have it. All right, so it's funny. I actually always considered the like FMVs from like the like Soviet campaign to be better than the Allied one, but now that I actually look back at all this sort of like inconsistencies basically that like the FMVs basically had, I have to say it's like not perfect, I guess. All right, so that's basically the entire campaign basically for like Red Alert's like FMVs here. What's left is basically the retaliation stuff. It's basically like all basically like stuff that wasn't actually in the original game. I wonder if I should actually have this stuff separate because it's not really like well, you know what? I'm gonna basically keep it here, so why not? Let's just go with like the introduction to like the first one here.
Sarin nerve gas. The Soviets love it. It's colorless, odorless, but it sure as hell ain't painless. Think you can remember that? Oh, and evacuate any civvies who get in the way. Remember, we're the good guys. Oh, by the way, I'm General Carville. Welcome to Greece.
Alright, these FMVs are pretty damn quick. So, the first FMV here is like, our first introduction to General Carter. Now, I want to note that, by the way, like, I never actually knew, like, about the Retaliation, like, FMVs that are basically here. And I only basically really learned about them with the remaster here. So, that's, like, my first indication that, like, Carter base was basically being used as a character before Red Alert 2. To sort of get some background on, like, General Carter there, he's basically, like, this allied American commander that basically comes over as a relief force to, like, help out the allies. And essentially, he's, like, going to be used again in, like, the following sequel, Red Alert 2, for, like, Red Alert. Anyhow, we get a very interesting sort of, like, showing what he's basically all about. He's, like, giving you some very, like, quick objectives basically to, like, follow. And he's like, oh, by the way, I'm General Carville. Welcome to Greece. For, like, initial introduction is, like, not bad, I guess, so let's just throw that right there, I think. Wait, why am I doing the allied ones first? Whatever, it doesn't really matter, does it? Let's just go with, like, the allied ones, I guess. So, basically, there's, like, Crackdown. Now, not by the way, at the end of, like, these, like, sets, you always get, like, this completion here, so here's the completion.
Funeral rules, Lieutenant. Only the good news.
Yes, sir. Field promotion to sergeant effective immediately.
You're briefly in, and then you're briefly out. So, I'll note that basically the idea of, like, the evacuation is basically, like, get a, summary of, like, what happened, and it's like, okay, you did a fairly good job. I'm gonna throw that basically up there as excellent, because it's a fairly good intro to sort of, like, get you into Greece and then, like, get you out of it. Alright, Fresh Tracks is next.
The commies are at it again, developing atomic capabilities. For me.
Alright, so Fresh Tracks is also a fairly excellent, like, little FMV. It basically gets to the point that, like, alright, the commies are at it again, the Starfish is going to do something to basically sort of help out. I don't really agree with it, and great, he's basically in trouble. Go help him out, then go deal with the Soviets. Alright, so the Siberia intro. It's worth knowing that it basically feels really odd, basically having, like, Siberia as being, like, the next basic piece in, like, this sort of, like, retaliation thing here. Because Siberia is basically out in, like, Soviet territory land, right? So, how are the Allies basically attacking there when they're, like, the Soviets are probably, like, attacking elsewhere, basically. Anyhow, let's see here. I'm gonna say it's laudable because it seems a little bit odd having, like, the Siberia, like, being here, but, at least it, like, works well with, like, the context of what's being, like, dictated to right here, so it's fine. Alright, trapped. Whoops. Down here I want.
Stavros, you old dog. Have you got any idea what a pain in the ass you are?
Alright, so you have to say it's very cheeky seeing, like, the end of, like, personal war. Essentially, like, Carter's basically talking to Stavros on the phone. He's like, oh, Stavros, you old dog. Heard the command had to assign you 3 provinces to basically change your diapers. So, yeah. I feel it's, like, really terrible to Stavros to basically, like, do that to him, but, I really like all in jest basically this guy, so it's fine. I'm gonna say it's an excellent, like, sort of outro. Alright, next is Italy.
Take a good long look, Major, because you'll be attacking that harbor at dawn. Baby steps.
Alright, so I'm I'll note that the the cutscene for Italy basically sort of works. Basically, like you have like this like very simple task of like conquering this harbor, moving on basically to sort of like get like a into like these Soviet subplanes that are like nearby and take them out. It's laudable, so let's just throw it right there. And then we get down here to like the end.
Commander, I believe I've got something that belongs to you.
I completely forgot about it, but apparently like that like intro, it sort of like ignores the fact that basically there's like some scientists to sort of rescue in that one. I'm gonna throw down mediocre as a result of that. Basically, the outro sort of like mentions basically the scientists they have to rescue, so that sort of makes up for it. But the rest of the stuff should have been fairly important. So yeah, let's just throw it basically like a mediocre this one here. I haven't had this presentation mode the entire time. Let's actually do that, I think. Presentation mode for this now. Alright, so, on to Poland with the Allies.
Well, we got a hostage situation, all right. Took care of business before you got in the car, Colonel. Because, son, you're in for one hell of a ride.
Alright, so, that one's just excellent. The Poland intro is basically like, Carvel's like, oh damn, everything's in haywire here. I've got mad tanks to deal with, I've got monster tanks to deal with. There's this guy at the evac. I've got to basically deal with like, this hostage situation here. And oh yeah, I have to basically run out all the sort of forces from Poland too. So have fun. Alright, so this is the last one for the Allied missions. I'll just basically get into it and I'll be right back.
Well, I know you have other missions that you've got to take care of. Don't let me slow you down. Keep up the good work, son.
Alright, so here's like the cinematic to basically finish off the Allied campaign. Got some destroyed stuff.
Commander, or I should say General, are you still on duty? Go home. Have a beer. You're a hero. Hell, we're all heroes.
Alright, so there's the outro and the Retaliation's end. So I'll note that for the outro, it seems like kind of like benign, like hooray, we got crumpets, good job. It's laudable, really, to me. But what's really like interesting is sort of like the end there because it's like very short. It's like, hell, we're all heroes. Ha 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 ha. I'm drunk. It's a little bit short though, so there's that to say about it. So laudable, I guess. I'm gonna say mediocre. Alright, so that's basically all the Allied cutscenes for Retaliation out of the way. Here's the ones for the Soviets.
Добрый день, Sergeant. Меня зовут Topolov. General Topolov. До свидания. That is all.
Alright, so there's basically an introduction to the Soviet Retaliation set of missions. I find it really interesting how they basically have Topolov being introduced here. He's he speaks in Soviet or Russian language. He's allies are being kind of a nuisance to developing their stuff basically in our face. We don't like that. Where would I basically throw him basically right here? I think it's a fairly good introduction to what he's basically all about, so I think I'm just gonna throw us right here. And excellent. And then we get down here to the Legacy of Telsa, completion.
Żal Rosju.
Attention! Zalroskik Zinchen.
Alright, so. I think that's a fairly excellent conclusion basically to, like, Top off there. He's like, I like you. And I don't like anybody, I'm Russian. But I like you. So, let's just throw this base right here. And move on to Austria.
Kamarad, Drasviti, I must speak quickly. These things I am telling you, I am not. Das Vidanya.
Alright, so. The Proving Grounds. This is basically like an early problem basically of like Counter-Strike because these missions are basically doing right here. Basically you're gonna have like, Cherkovsky and like, Volkov. And like, both of them are basically cybernetically enhanced in this part. But they're basically not cyber enhanced in like the Aftermath one, so it's like sort of like, ahead of what they should be. They're not really mentioned, but basically what it is for what it is, basically, so. It's another one where I think we're just gonna have to throw it basically down a little bit, so. I mean, it's laudable for what they're basically working with here, I guess. Let's just throw right there. Alright, top of the world, completion.
Salute, Commander. Congratulations on your success in Austria. You must forgive me if my interest in your success is a bit personal.
Alright, so. I feel like the outro basically for Austria is like a lot better than like the intro, because basically sort of like, has a very happy looking Topolov. I'll probably basically out there as the outro, because, it works. It doesn't really mention like, what you basically did for success and stuff like that, but it doesn't really need to, so, yeah. Alright, France, testing grounds.
Dobradien, Major. Radvidet. Our French intelligence confirms the Allied forces are developing two vehicle weapons. One.
I can't say anything much about like sort of intro. Basically, it's like, okay, here's what French are telling us. Do whatever you need to for it. It's just, yeah, it's whatever. France's intro, it goes right here. Alright, so. France's completion. Hey, there we go. I was wondering where I was basically going to see this one.
You have been busy, comrade. I am to present you with this Soviet star in recognition of your efforts in keeping the Allied dogs from completing development of their new toys.
Alright, so. I'll note that the outro for France isn't too bad. Basically, like, you have Topolov basically come in, it's like, alright, Command, you did a fairly good job here. Here's a star. You're doing well. Yeah, too well. Soon off, be worried about being out of the job. He doesn't seem to be like too broken up about the idea though, so it seems to be like an everyone in jest, so to speak. It's excellent basically for like things to come. Now, I want to basically this like sort of like bit we basically have right here with like the soldiers. That's technically an FMV right there, so. I think this is where we're just gonna, stop basically like, looking at this for a little bit. And we're just gonna go in here quickly and let's make ourselves an icon. So this is basically the like icon is basically thinking about making for like that right there. Essentially, we've got like let's see here. This is where I actually want to jump into this a little bit here. So basically, I have like red being for Soviets and blue being for like allies. I think that's basically like a Soviet cutscene. So I'm going to be like Soviet. Oh, it's like size 42 font I'm using here. So let's put this right here. Moves up a little bit. That was basically France, so let's just go France outro. Just gonna put this down here a little bit. This is basically what I do to sort of like make these like bitmaps or like pictures basically for like the icons basically. We go in here, we go like France outro. Let's get out of here. Very descriptive basically. So we're gonna save this. This is basically how I can make these like icons. By the way, just go in here, make them up. So this would be like the France outro. So this would be like 38. Honestly, probably just gonna go like this. Actually, let's go 50, 52. Also, show you what I'm just gonna do with this basically after that, but there's basically like that basically like right there. And more basically, let's just go out of here for a moment. We'll go like get the blue here, and we'll have like allies free. And we're just gonna put down in hysterics here, Tanya blowing the bridge. Okay, I think that might actually be like an FMV as well, on top of like the green screen. So there's that one. We're just gonna go find mission free here. It's not in here actually because there's actually no mission free. So let's just go 50 free here, and we'll just say like I realize these are gonna be a little bit out of order, but I'm just basically doing them after, right? So allies free, blowing the bridge. Now I do. I am sometimes a little bit fidgety and like trying to make sure like everything is like matching up perfectly. So I might like redo this. So basically like it'll be like number 19, that one, the one I just did there, or I might just leave it at the back here because like you're actually seeing this in real time. Basically, make the list, right? I'll edit this basically in a moment, but let's just continue on with like the last 4 here. So we got the Spain outro or intro.
Rebellions, revolution, betrayals. This time, comrade, we drink.
I think that's a fairly excellent intro to like these missions here. So, boom, Spain intro, excellent or fantastic rather. It basically drives home the point that like Top Law's not happy with like what he's basically doing right there. So yeah. All right, so here's basically the completion. We got this one again. Yeah, I know basically I have like different sort of like backgrounds for it, but whatever. It's basically still the same thing.
Congratulations, comrade. That was a difficult campaign. I do not envy you. Das vidanya, Kerja. Be well.
Alright, so then it drives into like the ally like finishing here. And of course the final one. The Retaliation Soviet end outro.
General.
I really like the like conclusion basically to like the Soviet like retaliation like bit there. Not like the Spain outro. The Spain outro kind of sucks, so it's mediocre. But the retaliation end like here, it's like, you know, I don't envy what we basically had to go through there, Commander. And I've really lost my heart, so, you know, have fun with my job if you want. General, good luck to you. It's an excellent conclusion. Gotta love it. Alright, so let's just go quickly look at the secret ant campaign start here, I guess.
Ants? Is this some kind of a joke? You got ants in your pants, call an exterminator. I'm on vacation. What? How big? Casualties? What do you mean the southern perimeter's been compromised?
And then we get the giant ants popping up. You know, it's like horrendously funny, basically, like, you know, the intro. It's like, what? How big? Casualties? What do you mean the southern perimeter's been compromised? You know, I really like this, like, sort of like, you know, side of like card. He's like, you know, what? I don't care. Go kick some ass. Ants? Ants. Well, for that, basically excellent, because it's a nice way of basically showing off, like, you know, the giant ant campaign. Alright, so at this point, we're just going to save our, you know, this right here. So, we're just going to save that for now. Oh, we got to save this too, I guess. I'm going to delete this in a moment. I don't really care about, like, you know, the stuff here for a moment, so whatever. Alright, so, I know basically if you want to basically edit this stuff, you can't, like, you know, take stuff in, but you can basically add in, so, if I want to, I can go in here, and I can basically add in, like, you know, a couple more, like, you know, icons, basically, so, here's basically 2 icons for Tanya and for, like, you know, the Allied soldiers. You know, it still works technically, so I'm just gonna throw this basically in there. Sort of. Guess hit submit here. Alright, so that basically adds in these 2 icons basically to rate. So you got the France outro, let's get out of here. That's basically the soldiers being, like, you know, run over by a tank. You know, it's basically like, you know, kind of comical and stuff like that. It probably could be a little bit better. But, you know, it's still fairly, like, you know, laudable. And you got, like, Tanya blowing bricks. That's, like, you know, interesting to look at, I guess. Well, the cinematic that basically comes after is, like, interesting, so we're gonna say that one's excellent. Alright, so that's basically it for the Red Alert FMVs. Took me a little bit basically to get through all of these because, you know, there's quite a few in, like, you know, the Red Alert, like, you know, remaster side of things. They're probably a little bit less in the Command & Conquer side of things. But whatever, I hope you guys basically enjoyed, like, you know, getting to see, like, all this, like, you know, background stuff basically you have to do for these tier lists. So we're just gonna save this and, you know, get it out of the way. I'm actually just go, you know, to my other tier list here basically. I like to try and keep these basically consistent, by the way, so like they all like sound like the same thing. So spell that right, please. Alright, so I was gonna copy this right here. You know what, I should actually be going into these bits right here, so if you use CNC Red Alert OSTs, DFuxa Red Alert FMV. Well, I meant to put that for one, but whatever, let's put it right here. So there we go. There's, like, you know, my tier list basically for, like, Command & Conquer Red Alerts FMVs. I'll do one eventually for, like, the, you know, Therium Dawn. I have to actually make them up first. But whatever. Hope you guys basically enjoy getting to see, like, all of this right here. I was gonna go to, like, you know, this right here. We'll go get rid of, like, you know, the initial one I made right here. And that's that. Alright, well. One more tier list I'm basically gonna do for, like, you know, all these, like, tier lists I've been doing. Then I'll probably look into, like, doing other stuff, like, say, like, the Dark Rain stuff. And for now, I hope you guys have basically enjoyed. Take care.